Hey guys, Rick here. I've got something cool for you. So, the last few days, I've been talking to somebody that I met on the Deathwatch Facebook group, a man named Lou Rollins. And he went ahead and has been exchanging information with me over Discord, and we've been having a great time. And he actually agreed to be interviewed by me. So, you're about to watch the first interview from Noob Hammer ever. So, this is the RTT Utah DDR Invitational second place finisher, Lou Rollins, who got that title by playing Deathwatch. I hope you enjoy. Take it away. This is Rick with Noob Hammer, and I'm sitting here with a special guest, our first guest on the channel, Lou Rollins, who just won the RTT in the DDR Invitational, if I'm remembering correctly, in
That's correct.
Utah
Yeah.
about 2 weeks ago. You,
Second place, but yeah,
right, you took second, but you took second with Deathwatch, which is an
I did.
interesting thing because I'm a new player myself. One of the armies that I play is Deathwatch. I've never been to any kind of tournament or anything, but just this morning I was perusing Reddit and the Deathwatch subreddit was showing some of the the latest tournament pairings and winnings from all armies in Warhammer, and Deathwatch was actually down 0.1% overall, even from before their supplement was released. But, if you talk to some of the other really well known players like Nick Nanavati, he's been running some Deathwatch in the Art of War group for a bit. He's getting an army together, and, he and John Lennon both see a lot of possibilities with this army, but I guess maybe the hobby lag or whatever the current situation we're in has stopped people from being able to play with those lists as much as they like. So, before we get into your list and the army itself and your event, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, how long you've been playing, and things of that nature?
Sure. I've been playing since second edition, 1993. Um, Moved to a small little town to go to school, and was looking for something to do. In small towns, there's not a whole lot to do usually, and walked into this gaming store and found that second edition box set in there, and I've been stuck ever since. It's been great. I've met a lot of fantastic people over the years, and I've got some friends that I met, 25, 30 years ago through the game that are still friends of mine today. And some of them made it big time too. So it's kind of cool to see where they've gone with things. And currently I play on a team. The DDR team, Double Dutch Rudder is the name of the team. And we've
Do
got
you
some
guys
great,
have
got some great
sense of humor?
players. Yeah, we got some great players. We got Thomas Hagstrom Oki, who was best in faction for Blood Angels 2 years ago. And he's been interviewed several times. Rich Kilton, the war boss, is best in faction for this last year for what it's worth for orcs, and then was also 2 years ago and second runner-up Renaissance Man in 2019 for the OVO. Scott Rumpel, best in faction for Space Wolves this last year, and has been top three for the last 3 years in competitive play. And then Jordan Gledhill just recently was highlighted a few times this last year for Adeptus Sororitas. In fact, his list was showcased on one of the Warhammer FAQs and Warhammer community page for Games Workshop a few months ago. And so just some really great players that have, elevated my game and helped me to play in a very competitive stance. And it's been, wonderful. And the thing I love about our team is that we're not these gotcha guys or these guys that are, going to be snarky with you when you play. We really enjoy just having a good time, making friends, and giving you a competitive and fun game. And so that's really where we come from.
That's
So
really
that's,
really awesome. Yeah, I've been fortunate to meet some local players who are also big into the whole just teaching,
yeah,
not doing the whole gotcha hammer because that's not fun.
right. No, not at
And
all.
it doesn't make people want to stay around, which surprise.
I know,
Uh,
big surprise, right?
yeah, for real. So you've got
Well,
some pretty stiff competition there. These people have been around the block a few times. Sounds like you have as well. So you definitely weren't just smacking new players all weekend.
no, no. No, these guys are really know their thing, and you know, because we also practice together, they kind of know my shenanigans, and we've got another one coming up here in a few weeks that I'm looking forward to going to. I've got to take Rich down. Rich is just a beat stick, and he won a couple of GTs last year, including the Gentleman's GT where Reese Robbins was at. Brandon Grant, former LVO champ, was there, and he won the whole thing. Beat Brandon Grant with his orcs.
I was
And
just
but
gonna say he was the orc player, right? He runs Death
yeah,
Skulls.
he runs Death Skulls, yeah, and he knows all my tricks, and so I've got to, you know, they push me to come up with new things all the time, and so I think I might finally have a list that's gonna do it if we end up playing each other. So I'm looking forward to it.
Very cool. So what was the pairings like? It looked like it was a 12-person tournament. So
Yeah, we had 12 people there. Yep.
so what were your rounds?
So the first round was a tie, and so it was just 50 points and 50 points,
An actual tie. Wow.
and yeah, ironically, and I don't know why this is, I get more ties, I think, a lot of times than most people do, and every time it happens, it's like, how did that happen? And so we'll go through with my opponent, and we'll pick apart, the points each round and where things were, and sure enough, it was a tie. I tied gentleman in California when I went to the Bay Area Open a year ago, and in second round, Kenny Bear was his name, and we had to go back and tally the points just to make sure. And sure enough, it was a tie. And so,
What's the army for that round?
Um, I'm trying to remember.
You play so many games, they all just
they all run together. Yeah, the one that really stood out to me was actually my second match, which was as a young man named Spencer, great kid, really really smart, and he plays AdMech, and AdMech just scared me to death because they've got so many guns, and I had forgotten about big guns never tire, and so when I charged in his big robots, his Castellans with his not his Castellans, but those big shooty robots with my hand-to-hand combat squad, I was just excited to lay the smack down, and then he got 60 dice out, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's right, I forgot they shoot in hand-to-hand combat.
It looks like he was doing the two groups, 3 Castellan robots.
Yeah, and they really did some heavy damage. Now the Storm Shield, surprisingly, with the 1-up to your saving throw and still on a 4-up, really do pretty well. I was surprised. I weathered more shots than I thought I was going to, but he really did a number on that unit, and so I had to come back and recuperate and figure out, okay, I've lost this almost 400 point unit here. What am I going to do to recoup? And you really have to think about sticking to your mission, sticking to your objectives, fighting for those points, and I was fighting from behind the 8 ball coming into it, and so and this particular list that I'm running right now seems to do that every round. I seem to get behind the first 2 turns, but it just kind of steamrolls, and by the end of the game, I'm usually ahead. So
very cool. So what was the last round like then?
The last one was surprisingly calm. I played a Dark Angel player, another friend of mine, Aaron is his name.
That's why it was calm. They can do nothing and score like 70 points.
Well, I think for me, I just knew that his deployment had already cost him the game. I could see where he had lined up his units, that the game was mine from the beginning, and that really just comes out of experience. When you have been playing as long as I have, you can kind of see if somebody deploys in a bad spot, and you can exploit that, and he did. And one of the units for the Deathwatch right now, there's 2 actually that work really really well, and people overlook them all the time. I'm not sure why, but one is to have an intercessor, just a 10-man intercessor squad with stalkers, with the heavy stalkers, and he put his knights and bikes out in the middle, and then he had an inceptor squad on top of a building. And so it was a heavy CP sink because I did the 2 CP for the SIA, special issue ammunition, and So they were, in Devastator Doctrine, they're hitting at -4 with, 3 points of damage each on the shot. And yeah, there were a few misses and a couple that didn't wound, but for those that did, it just shot that bike unit off the board. And then I spent another 2 CP to fire again, and I shot that Inceptor unit off the board except for one model. And so it just, I think more than anything, it psychologically really dealt a severe blow to him.
That was turn one.
That was turn one, and he just
right off the...
he struggled. Yeah, he struggled coming back from that, and then I teleported my hand-to-hand combat unit off the board and turned him into Space Wolves and dropped him in with the Librarian with Null Zone, and turned off his invulnerable saves on his Deathwing Knights and just wrecked him. It was,
you got to get through those layered defenses on those Deathwing.
Yeah.
Sure. Well, you've already started to go into it a bit, so let's get into the list, shall we?
Yeah, absolutely. Sure.
All right. So I was looking at your list. I found it on Best Coast pairings, and I immediately, like, there's so much that stands out. Like, if you've been on the Deathwatch subreddit or you've been on the Deathwatch Discord, like, there are definitely some things that people think are just incredible, and they say work for them, and this says almost none of that.
No, so, it's a no.
So the big meta right now is lots of like Proteus kill teams with tons of Vanguard vets, and you combat squad them, and then the Vanguard vets go be Vanguard vets and
sure.
Wreck face while the veterans just hold objectives. But you went so straight out the gate. You have a Vindicare, which I thought was exciting because I own one of those models and I've only used it twice and it has let me down both times. And so now he's just a pretty poster boy that sits in my display cabinet. So why the Vindicare?
Well, a few reasons. One, I think sometimes people don't consider the psychological threat a certain unit can place in a tournament setting against an opponent. And I've had experiences in the past where bringing a Vindicare cost my opponent the game before it even started. And I remember another tournament I went to where I picked a secondary objective that I knew I wasn't going to max out points on with the Vindicare, but I also knew the opponent and knew that it would fluster him, and it did. And he ended up committing an entire squad of Shining Spears to try and get rid of him. And he did get rid of him on turn one. I never got a shot off with a Vindicare, but it placed that unit in an exposed place where I was able to shoot him off the board, and that was the game right there by the end of turn one. And so, having a Vindicare out there, even if he doesn't shoot anything, is going to force your opponent to deploy his HQ units in places that he might not normally do that. And, one of the things that this list operates off of is taking the Lord of Deceit Warlord trait on one of your characters. And so it allows you to redeploy. And so your Vindicare doesn't have to come out on turn one. You can keep him in reserve and bring him out on turn two in a place. Yeah, where you can put him in a spot where you can really target in on those characters. And so he just, for 100 points, he does a lot of things that I think sometimes people don't consider. And he's a very powerful tool, even just before the game starts, because your opponent knows, wow, I'm going to have to keep an eye out on where I put my characters.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, I it's one of those things where he's the coolest assassin to me. I know there's the anti-psyker one and the other two, the one that like steals CP, and then I can't remember the other one, but the Vindicare is like the quintessential assassin. He's got the stealth suit and the big sniper rifle, and I always wanted that guy to work for me. And I'm gonna start playing with them more just because of your list right here. But
awesome.
If we keep going down into your HQs, you bring a captain,
a
librarian, and notice everybody watching this. Notice it's not a Primaris librarian; it's a regular old firstborn librarian, right?
Yep.
And then it's a firstborn captain and a watchmaster who's also firstborn, even though really he's our chapter master.
Right.
So let's start with your captain. What's he there
Well,
for?
really just to provide aura buffs. He's flexible. I can put him. This particular list runs a drop pod with a couple of command squads that I can, protect him with. But there's just flexibility with him, so I can, depending on where my opponent is placing his army and what kind of army he's bringing, I can keep him back in the rear, buffing out those intercessors, or I can keep him, behind a building, securing an objective and providing some additional buffs to the units that I've got back there. And if I remember correctly, he's one of the warlord traits he brought was optimized priority. So I can be locking down objectives, and those units that are doing that can still be shooting. And so he's a force multiplier. And I think in ninth edition, um, commanders are intended to do that, and probably should be doing that. And so, that's really what he's there for.
So optimized priority is actually on your Watchmaster on this list. I don't know if you probably move them around pretty frequently to play with them, but you
Yeah, and
had Vigilance Incarnate. So
on him, right?
yeah, I could see how you're gonna drop him down in the drop pod. He gives the aura of reroll ones to hit, and then
Yep,
with Vigilance in Incarnate, he's also giving reroll ones to wound against whatever the battlefield roll is that you've dropped behind. So that's nice and
correct.
flexible, and that's the kind of stuff that drew me towards Deathwatch, like the flexibility, being able to pick and choose exactly what you need, what you want when you need it. And I thought that was what was great. And when I was talking to you earlier with your librarian, you blew my mind by telling me about the tome of Malkador, which I hadn't even realized. Like, I just skimmed right past it, right? Because the Deathwatch relics are so good that I
They
didn't
are.
think at
Yeah.
all about any of the base space marine ones. But why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about why you chose the tome and why not a Primaris librarian?
Sure. So, there's a few things, and in full disclosure, I know that some of the conversations I have about Death Watch and the list builds and things that they do contribute to the meta sometimes in not a good way. And so, I'll throw that out there. I know that, some of the things that we do in ninth, we could do in eighth, but it didn't cost command points to do. And I fear that some of those may have been conversations I was having with Reese at the Bay Area Open and a few other people that were, testers for the game and play the game and contribute to, where we're at right now. And so my apologies to my Death Watch brothers if I did contribute in any way to that. I'm sorry. But truthfully, being able to take a unit of vets, attack, fall back, shoot, and recharge was pretty redonkulous. And so I think it merited, the command point cost for that. But so yeah, the librarian, I needed him to get in, and so I believe he's got a jump pack on him. And so, you can't bring a Primaris librarian with a jump pack. The only other option is, I think, to either have a Phobos librarian pre-deployed mid-board with maybe a unit of incursors around him to protect him or something like that, or dropping in a Terminator librarian where you can get him where you want him. But he needed to be able to get to the units where I wanted him so I could get that null zone off if I needed it to turn off invulnerable saves.
Yeah,
So that
that
my
null zone. Woo!
yeah, it's pretty beastly. So the Tomb of Malkador, what that does is it allows you to pick, at least right now, and this is why my disclosure, for right now at least, it allows you to pick an additional power that any librarian in a Death Watch army knows from any of the disciplines. So if I'm taking a Phobos librarian, and I want to pre-deploy him mid-board and put Tenebra's Curse on him to slow down my opponent, I can take the Tomb of Malkador and take Null Zone with him. So I still have that option to throw that out there if I come across an opponent, like Death Guard or Dark Angels right now, who are really resilient and operate off that invulnerable save. And so that was really the intent behind the Tomb and about, having that Primaris librarian to get in there where I
and
needed him.
and custodes too. I mean,
Yeah.
custodes running 3-ups a lot of the time.
Yeah.
You can have 2-ups on techno priests or from Adeptus Mechanicus.
Right.
You can, even Grey Knights, if you subscribe to the theory, purifiers can get it to a 2-up invul. I don't
Right.
personally think that's the way that's intended to be played, but theoretically it's possible. So turning that
Sure.
off is just, you're gonna melt. Like,
Yeah.
custodes without their invul, like they're still T5 and 3 wounds for the most part, but they're gonna feel it.
Sure. No, absolutely. Well, and this list operates off of some really key synergies. There's a lot of high level order of operations that happen that, if everything happens like it's supposed to, then it does a tremendous amount of damage. And so, he's designed to get in there and provide that opportunity for that hand-to-hand combat vet squad to get in and wreck things. You turn them into space wolves. They're heroically intervening up to 6 inches now, and you can buff them up so that they're hitting on 3s and 2s with their thunder hammers, and it's ridiculous. And so that last opponent, his Dark Angels just didn't weather. By the end of turn 1, I think out of 10 Terminators, he had 3 guys left. And so,
like Deathwing Terminators, you're still only wounding them on 4s, right? Like,
right?
But,
yeah. When you got 20 plus Thunderhammers attacks coming at you, it's gonna hurt.
Some are gonna get through.
That's right.
Damage is a dead Terminator. Yeah, for sure.
That's right. Yeah.
So a little bit of a tangent. Speaking of Death Guard, in my own local meta, I've noticed that the heavy Thunderhammers are money.
Oh yeah,
because
for sure.
It's 4 base damage, so you can splat a Blight Lord with 1 swings. I was curious why I didn't see any of those in there, but the Thunderhammer Storm Shield combo is so strong.
Yeah.
So moving on to your Watchmaster here. Looks like a pretty standard fare. I don't see a relic on him in this list, which I don't see Tome of Ectoclades in this list at all. And that's probably our best, well, at least my favorite relic out of the Deathwatch, the Deathwatch only relics.
Yeah, the tomb is powerful. In fact, this is probably the first tournament I've taken a list to in probably almost 2 years where I haven't run it. I always have it somewhere. But the Vigilus Spear, and I don't know if it's just not on that list, but he was running the Vigilus Spear.
Yeah, the Spear of the First Vigil.
That's it. And boy, I tell you what, turning that thing into rapid fire too, and getting up close within 12 inches and getting 4 shots off with that bad boy with special issue ammunition is money. And
so it's basically a Stormbolter with special issue ammo.
Yeah, and it's master crafted, so it's doing more than just 1 wound. Yeah.
So it's base and 2, 3 with special issue ammo.
That's right.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Yeah.
And so he would go in and just daka, and all of a sudden it was like, oh my gosh, this guy's crazy. But
that's really cool, especially because when I run the Tome of Ectoclades, I swear I forget to use it half the time. Like either I've lost so badly it didn't matter, or I've won so handily it didn't matter. Also, I'm playing with other pretty inexperienced players for the most part. So
sure. Well, and I've learned. I'm old enough now that if I don't put like little reminder tokens down by my guys, or I have a little sheet I keep off to the side to remind me to work through the phases, right? I'll forget stuff. So you're not the only one that struggles with that. We all do.
No, I feel you there. Grey Knights, I have to have cheat sheets on who has what psychic buffs on them, or I'll just completely forget.
Sure. But the other great thing about that too is it's really good in hand-to-hand combat, and he's not like a Dante Stellar Commander type thing or a Sanguinor, but he is a solid performer, and he does go in hand-to-hand combat and deal out some pretty handy damage, and so he's just always been a steady performer, and a lot of the lists that I build, he's not in there, but I just felt like with this particular list, I wanted to be able to put pressure on my opponent on 2 fronts, whether it was the captain in the drop pod with a command squad and the Watchmaster behind with the gun line, or vice versa. I had some flexibility there, and it turned out that it worked really well.
Yeah, it's a good call because drop pods can't move Primaris, so
no,
the Watchmaster isn't. Neither is your captain, and neither is your librarian.
Right.
So they can go
That's
with
right.
the drop pod or the Rhino.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
which we'll get to here in a little bit. So you have Paragon of their chapter Ultramarines, which is also my favorite one because we burn through CP so fast.
Yeah. Yes.
So for those of you that don't know, that one allows you for any spent CP, you roll 1d6, and on a 4 up, you
Hmm.
get 1 CP back. Maximum of 1 per turn, of course. But it
4 up or 5 up? One of those.
I thought it was a 4 up. It might be 5. I don't have my book
Well,
with
it
me at the
farms
moment.
CP. That's the important point,
Yes.
right?
Right. And it's every time you spend any. So if you do one
Yeah.
gangbuster round and you spend 5, you get to roll
Yeah.
5.
Yep.
And 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 if you get one back, you're that's good for that whole turn.
That's right.
You got one back.
Absolutely.
So
Yep.
the potential to
Well,
get
and
2 CP a turn is huge
it
instead of
is,
one.
and one quick point too, going back to the Vindicare originally, he's got some things that can be a trap for you, but if you're wise about it, you can get CP back as well, and that is,
Oh, that's right.
using. I've got eliminators in my list, and so they'll kind of plink down a warlord, and then with your Vindicare, you can, headshot them and eliminate that threat, and that can give you 2 CP back, and then you can spend another CP to shoot again. And so he can farm CP for you as well. And that's another boon
Nice.
that he brings. Yeah.
Yeah, I forgot about that. So the Vindicare is a 0 CP strat that if he kills a character on his shooting turn, he gets 1 CP back. So potentially you then fire again, and if you kill another, you get another. Well, you can't use the same strategy in more than
Can't use it twice.
in the same
Right.
phase. Yeah. So
Right.
yeah, that's cool too. I didn't think about that at all about how to use the Vindicare at all. And then you have the optimized priority warlord trait on the Watchmaster as well. So, which I love because there's nothing that makes you feel worse in a game than having like your 400 elite unit have to do an action and then can't do anything for the rest of the
Right.
turn, right?
Right.
So,
Yeah.
optimized priority allows them to shoot. They still can't charge, but they can shoot.
They can shoot and they can do an action, which,
Yeah.
staying on top of your secondaries and managing your secondary game is really important. And statistically, right now, at least from what we have, statistics bear out that if you can get just 5 additional points on turn 1, then you've got a 68% chance of winning the game. And so,
That's
being able to get that unit
Makes
up on
sense
a
to me.
on an
Makes sense to me.
objective, yeah. So being able to shoot and then take an objective on that turn 1 is huge.
Yeah. All right, so troops. Lots of people run the Fortis kill teams. I see that a lot with the bikes, just outriders everywhere. You just took regular old intercessor squads. You got 2 of them. One 5-man with the normal rapid fire bolt rifle, and then you got one 10-man, as you said earlier, with the stalker bolt rifle, and that's because they have the 36-inch range, the -2 AP, not -1, and then they also have 2 base damage. Downside being
Correct.
they're now heavy 1. But then, as you also mentioned, you can Deathwatch has the special issue ammunition stratagem for Primaris models that allows them to get a special issue ammunition type of your choice, which you would probably grab the +1 damage, right? So
Absolutely.
so now they're heavy 1, strength 4, -2 AP, or -3 in Devastator, and now they're
Right.
3 base damage. So you're now
Yes.
killing Plague Marines from Deathwatch in one shot. You're dropping
Yeah.
Inceptors, like you said, right?
Right.
Yeah, you're killing Terminators. Yeah, that's good.
It's a really good gun line, and truthfully, I don't play with unpainted models. Even when I practice, you can ask my teammates, or I show up with an unpainted model. It's like, ooh, Lou showed up with an unpainted model. I just I just don't play with unpainted models because I think it ruins the narrative of the game. Even though we all know they're plastic soldiers, right? And so
Sure.
that unit came largely because my vet squad with stalkers weren't finished. And so, I knew that I was going to have to be prepared for heavy point sync in Dev Doctrine with them. But, the other thing that I forgot about when I was playing was like, wait a minute, I can shoot him again. And so there's a benefit to running,
Yeah.
I think, a unit of Primaris for that reason. even if you never use the SI, the double tap option with those heavy stalkers is huge. And now with the heavy intercessors coming out at T5 and 3 wounds, look out. And they've got a 42-inch range with that executor bolt rifle, so pretty
Yeah.
serious.
It's legit. So now, yeah, now all those other things that were, toughness 5, like other Gravis, for instance, you're now at
Right,
least wounding them on 4s instead of 5s. So,
right.
I
And
also, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
oh, I'm just going to say there's also a strat now that you can also reduce damage on those Mark 9, 9, 10 grab armor suits as well. So they can even reduce damage and be even more resilient.
Yeah.
Park an apothecary behind them, and they're going to just tank stuff.
Yeah, that's the way I roll. Is the death ball of 5 heavy intercessors and 5 plasma
Yeah,
interrupters. I used to
yeah.
run eradicators, which were also good, and now they're cheaper than the plasma
I
interceptors.
know, right?
But man, that
Crazy.
blast on like Necron warrior blobs is money. Oh, it feels so
Yeah,
good to just
yeah.
kill 30 Necron warriors.
Yep, yep, for sure. And
Or
they're
30
tough.
is a stretch, but 20 is easy to do.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Um, so I also noticed on your 5-man intercessor, the sergeant has a power fist. Is there a
He does.
is there a particular reason for that, or is that just because you had some extra points?
Yeah, two. I had some extra points. It's like, where are we going to put it? Well, this unit's going to run around and create hate and discontent. So, if they happen to survive and he gets in hand-to-hand combat, it's just one more thing that your opponent has to deal with. So that was, kind of a last-minute thought. Well, we'll just throw a power fist on this guy.
So I'm assuming the 5-man intercessor squad is going to stay back and hold your one of your home objectives. That's their primary role most of the time.
Really, they're there to disrupt what my opponent's having to deal with. Because one of this things that this unit does, and you don't catch it right at first, but there's a lot of threat overload with this army and a lot of problems that your opponent's having to deal with. And they just add one more element to that so they can stay back and hold the objective. Most of the time, I found them running around the board in cover and popping out and shooting units to finish off, that last pesky Dark Angel, Deathwing Knight or that last Castellan robot. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And then if your opponent doesn't deal with them, they're going to hold that objective down wherever they're at, or they're got to decide, well, I gotta score some points. So maybe that's the easiest squad to go over, and so it forces decisions sometimes that maybe aren't the best strategically, depending on how you play them. But they're a solid unit. They do well. They perform well.
Very cool. So moving on to more troops, because this is a Deathwatch army, so almost everything's a troop.
Everything's OBSEC, baby.
Yeah, you have 2 Proteus kill teams. The first one is veterans, a biker, and then a black shield, and 3 Terminators, all with storm shields and thunderhammers. So
Yeah,
this is your melee beat stick, obviously.
that's right. Yep, that's what that unit's for.
And you run them as a big 10-man, or do you combat squad them most of the time?
I rarely combat squad them because I run them usually one of 2 ways. Either A, they're in a Corvus Black Star jumping out on turn 1 and wrecking things. In this particular army, I teleport them off turn 1, bring them back turn 2 as Space Wolves, and they just wreck stuff. And so, the bike obviously is there to allow them to jump out of hand-to-hand combat and charge again. The Black Shield's there to, if you want to spend that 1 CP, to heroically intervene in case, in that last game, my opponent decided, ouch, this unit really hurt me. I'm going to back off and try and shoot. And I always ask, are you going to charge? No, I think I'm just going to hang back. I do have a Black Shield in this squad right here. Oh, yeah. And then it's like, well, if I don't charge, he's going to charge me. But if I do charge, I'm probably going to get wiped. So I guess I might as well just charge in. So it forces, again, important decisions from the opponent that you can almost kind of predict in a way. And what you're going to be dealing with ahead of time. And so they've always been a money unit for me for the last 2 years. I've run them in one way, shape, or form in just about every tournament I've played in. And they've just performed really well for me all the time.
I did notice you gave him a storm shield, and if you gave him another one-handed melee weapon, he'd get an additional attack because he's a black shield. But you went with the storm shield just for a little more survivability on that.
Yeah, he needs the durability because, the other thing too that you've got to be careful with is which model to pull off and which model to dedicate wounds to. And so you've got to know, especially with this hand-to-hand combat unit, the sequence that you're going to work through as you're pulling models and casualties off. And he's always the last one there because even by himself, he's still a really potent character with that Thunderhammer and Sword Shield, and I need him to stick around and survive because, again, if they decide to peel back from that unit and leave that side of the board because they don't like what's happening, and he's the only one left, he's still going to run around and secure objectives.
Yep.
But psychologically, they're like, this dude's going to be hitting me on 3s with that stinking Thunderhammer, and he's going to be hitting me with 5 attacks on the charge. I don't want to deal with him.
Yeah.
And so it really helps a lot.
I mean, that's a character level of attacks.
It is. Captain. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really good. And you went with chainswords. Is that for the extra attack, or is that the save points? Lots of chainswords in this list.
Yeah, all of the above. Rick, it's amazing to me how powerful chainswords can be. Even just a standard 10-man Proteus kill team with just regular vets and Deathwatch Stormbolters in one hand and chainswords in the other, jumping out of a Rhino or a drop pod, they're going to be getting over 40 attacks with those chainswords. And the Stormbolters within 12 inches, or not the Stormbolters, but the Deathwatch Bolters within 12 inches are going to be 20 shots. I almost put Stormbolters on some of these units for the firepower, and I think in another list I probably will do that. But you don't want to kill off so many models that your opponent starts pulling models off of the front and then they're outside of engage range. But 40 plus chainsword attacks in Assault Doctrine at -2, it's just weighted dice, and you're gonna hurt stuff. So
it is it's interesting that you brought that up because when I started playing Deathwatch, I did the normal thing where I took like 2 Fortis kill teams, whole bunch of Outriders, right? And they get a tremendous amount of attacks on the charge. It's ridiculous. But
it's ridiculous.
I noticed that when I was fighting my friends who were bringing like tier 5, toughness 5. Like I got a friend who plays Nids all the times, and he loves his warriors. He uses lots of warrior blobs, and if I remember right, they're toughness 5. And man, like that, just wounded on 5s, even with all this extra attacks, it's rough.
It's
and then
tough.
they also fight on death and all that stuff. But like, I thought it was pretty underwhelming personally, at least compared to like a Lightning Claw, which gets you the extra attack, and you get to reroll wounds, but then it also costs points, right? Whereby a chainsword is free. So.
Well, it is free, and one of the things that we're seeing in lists, and I think my buddy, I just forgot his name over there with Glasshammer over in the UK, Manny Chima, his videos have been popular here recently, and he's been running Deathwatch with, the 5 intercessors and the 5 outriders, and prior to the points increase, there was an article that was run on. Point for point and damage output for damage output between just regular veteran bikers and outrider bikers. The math just doesn't prove that outriders are a better choice. And now that the points are up on outriders, I'm not convinced that they're a better option. And so, I think just running regular bikers with the chainsword has been effective. I typically run 3 with 2 Vanguard vets with storm shields for a little more durability and to make sure they maintain the mixed unit ability so they can still move through terrain and stuff like that. And they've been great. No complaints.
Yeah, I stopped using the Outriders too. The speed is really nice. And those bases are enormous, so you can do all kinds of weird shenanigans in combat and stuff. But I didn't feel, like you said, I didn't feel like they were worth the points, especially after they got nerfed. So they went from 40 to 45 or 35 to 40?
I think they might have gone from 45 to 50.
Oh, yeah.
So you bring 5 men, that's 250 points. That's an entire fairly decent kitted out Proteus kill team with a Vanguard vet, a biker, and a Terminator in there to do some janky shenanigans, and I think that's a much better option point wise. So
So you mentioned earlier, and I saw this too. So I've done my own mental math on the Deathwatch teleport Homer for your first Proteus kill team, and it never ended up like a good choice to me because I always thought of like using it on turn two, but then you have to use it at the beginning of your movement phase on that turn,
Right.
and then you come in at the end of your movement phase on the next turn. And I
Yep.
always thought like, man, that's a whole turn of them not shooting, not charging, not fighting, and that didn't really seem worth it. But you're using it as like a deployment shenanigan. You can
Yes.
like kind of tow them out and have them be visible, but if you go first, you just bloop and you're gone anyway, and then
Right.
you deep strike them next turn.
Yeah. And the beautiful thing about Deathwatch, and it's kind of a double-edged sword, is there are so many tools. There's literally just so many different ways that you can play the army, and I love that about it. At the same time, I think there's almost too many choices, kind of like back in, when I was a teenager, you'd walk into a video store and there's thousands of movies to choose from.
Yeah.
It's like, I can't pick, and so I think you really need to know ahead of time, what is the purpose of this unit? What role is it going to fill? And if you have an answer to that question, I think it's going to be easier to decide, is spending the points on this teleport homer going to be worth it or not? And there's times where I don't bring it because it's not going to benefit that particular unit. And so,
I mean, it's just one more thing that I wrote it off entirely, and now I'm kind of thinking, did I miss something? Should I play with this? Should I see how it goes? So
well, I think my style of play is always keeping my opponent on their toes, and even with my teammates, I try and bring, even to our practice nights, something new that they haven't seen yet. And so, when you're mid game and you've got to get a unit to a critical point, remember that now in ninth edition, because this wasn't a thing in eighth, if you got a teleport homer there, yeah, you do have to bring them off the board a turn ahead of time, but you can redeploy them anywhere on the board where you've got another Death Watch unit. And so, if I've brought that Watchmaster in on the other side of the board with that drop pod, and the command squads that are with him are getting depleted, and he's going to be hung out there to dry, and I need him to stay on that side of the board, I can bring a unit off and bring it in where he is. And now all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, my opponent's going, these guys were over here, now they're over
yeah.
there. Now I got to deal with this. And so it just really kind of throws them out of kilter sometimes. And do I do that all the time? No. But having the option to be able to do it if I need to sometimes can be a clutch play in a game.
Anybody who has played Grey Knights or played against Grey Knights in the past know Gate of Infinity
Yeah.
does the same thing,
Yep.
except without having to come in near any enemy units or near
Right.
any
Right.
friendly units. So
Sure.
I've actually done a move once where it was like turn four, and I just gated onto an empty objective and scored it for turn five. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
great. I wouldn't have been able to do that with any other army. Um,
Exactly.
so very cool. Moving on to next Proteus kill team. You've got more Storm Shields, so I'm glad you and I are thinking alike in that way. I put Storm Shields
Durability.
on as many of my guys as I possibly can.
Yeah.
Um, I see that you have one Infernus Heavy Bolter, which I feel that the Infernus is like, no one talks about it. Everybody thinks it's too expensive, but I'm like, that is a heavy flamer and a heavy bolter on one dude, and you can
It
do four
is.
of them in one squad.
Yeah, that's right. Well, and I've got one list that I've worked on where, I've got a kill team where I've got 3 Terminators with heavy flamers, and then 4 of these guys with the Infernus heavy bolters. And it's like, surprise, here I am. That unit of 30 grots or orcs or whatever, they're all gone now, right?
Yeah.
And so, but more than anything, I feel like because we've got that strat that allows you to spend a CP for a mortal wound off of a heavy bolter for the Death Watch, that might
Wait,
be a key.
which stratagem is this?
I'd have to look it up.
Well, all right. I'll talk to you after this, and I'll just pop it on screen for everybody to
Yeah,
hear. But I don't remember that
just
strat.
just options again, and maybe I'm thinking back to 8th edition. You've got me questioning myself now. I
No,
think
no,
I'll
it's
I'll find
more.
it. I'll find it.
It's honestly more probably that I have I've like low key ADD, so I never actually read the book all the way through.
Gotcha.
So
Gotcha.
that's probably what it is. Um, so I also saw some other cool stuff in here. Oh yeah, I guess so. Is the Infernus in there? Is also like a "don't charge me, bro" kind of thing, or like "please
Yeah.
charge me, bro" kind of thing?
Yeah, it depending on who you're playing against, it can be one of those things where it can be deterrent. And Rich, with his orcs, absolutely detests blast weapons.
Yeah.
And so, and he knows that I've got the stem the green tide strat, which I have used on him before. And so it forces him to take time to think: do I charge? Do I not charge? Do I charge? Do I not charge? And that's an important effect, because when you're getting inside your opponent's head like that and forcing them to really consider their choices, that's a win in my opinion.
Yeah.
So
So for everybody listening in, the Stem the Green Tide is a Deathwatch only strat that can only be used against orcs. That if you kill a model during Overwatch when they are charging you, their charge is reduced by 2 inches,
correct.
which
Yes.
can save your butt. Like if you see them roll a 6-inch charge, and you know they need all 6 inches, you can completely fail that whole charge and still kill a couple models.
It can. Well, and yeah, absolutely. And if you think about combos again, so if you're managing, your play, that particular unit, you want to try and have a black shield in there, especially when you've got hordes coming against you. In particular, in this case, orcs coming against you, because what an orc player will typically do is, oh, I've got 30 boys coming in. I'm going to make it. I'm going to make sure that my unit is within, 3 inches. So if I fail my charge, I can get in. And there hasn't been one tournament I've been to where I've played that strat where they have not failed and then they can't charge. And because they can't charge, I can still heroically intervene with that entire unit with the black shield,
Yeah.
and then wreck them and then slingshot off them. And now I'm 9 inches down the board into their territory. And it's like, wait a minute, where did this unit come from? And then it's back to you, and you're in a great position to go secure another objective, or to get into their back line where they weren't expecting you to be. And so it's money for sure.
Beautiful. That's beautiful. And then if they do get within 3 inches and they're a big unit of boys, you gotta, you can throw a grenade too.
Yep.
Just like make it worse.
Yep.
Yeah.
That strat used to be worse in 8th edition. It was an inch for every model you killed. And
Yeah,
so
I
it was
reading that,
stupid. It was stupid. It was way OP. I'm glad they brought it into balance for the game. So
Well, special issue ammo, you could just wound on twos, so that would have been.
it was dumb.
Good. It was dumb, but yet it's not like Deathwatch was pulverizing everybody and
No.
winning tournaments. Like
No. Well, and I think largely in 8th edition, it was just, I think there was almost too much, even for top players like Nick and TJ Lanigan and Sean Naden. Just congratulations to him, just won the Clutch GT this last weekend. And, a lot of these guys, part of it's they like different types of armies, but I think also because Deathwatch can be so overwhelming in some ways with so many options, we just didn't have a lot of people playing. And, even a lot of the other guys like my friend Anthony Demori, who won Best in Faction last year, who plays a very different type of list too. There's just so much, and you want to try and be able to, put yourself in a position, in a place where you can, and be in a victory and be competitive. But there's a lot to get your head around. There's a lot of choices and options, and sometimes you can pick choices that you think will be good, and if you don't test it out, you get into a tournament, it was like, that was a boneheaded move. Why did I bring that unit, or why did I bring that relic? Because it didn't play like I wanted it to. And so, I think there's that aspect of it as well.
Yeah, my first army was Grey Knights, and I loved them because they could play in every single phase, but they're also very complicated. It's a lot to remember.
Yes.
And then what won me over to Deathwatch, man, I looked at that supplement. I saw the Brotherhood of Veteran strat, and I was like, I'm sold. That's amazing. Also,
it's huge.
OBSEC Troop Terminators is also money. So
huge. Oh, absolutely. Well, and and I when I started playing way back in the day, I played Ultramarines, then I played Imperial Fists, and then I played Space Wolves, and then I played Imperial Fists again, and I was just jumping around so many. And finally, I just thought, why don't I play them all? And when I first read a few paragraphs in some of the early rules editions about this Deathwatch, in fact, what sold me on it was the RPG game. And they made Artemis, the Artemis model. In fact, I'm working on one for the OVO for this next year in masterclass painting. But I was sold. I was like, well, I could play them all. And so I painted an army in 6th edition to look like Deathwatch, mostly so I could play whatever chapter I wanted to. Oh, you're playing Orcs, I want to play Crimson Fist. You're playing Necrons, I want to play Iron Hands. You're playing, Eldar with a bunch of bikes, I'm going to play White Scars. And so it gave me options, and I could play one army without having to change around a lot. And then when they came out with rules, it was just like, oh my gosh, this is my army, right? And so I've been playing them ever since.
That's very cool. I love the fact that well, first of all, I ought to say I actually hate the black armor. Like, I don't like edge highlighting, so you have to edge
You do,
highlight
yeah.
black, right? So
you do, yeah.
But I love the fact that like they all look a little different. They've all got like their different pauldrons, and you can hang furs off your Space Wolf guys,
right?
And you can chop off one organic arm and stick a cybernetic arm on your Iron Hands guy.
Yeah,
I love that stuff. And
it's pretty cool.
Yeah, and they stay uniform and military, but with individuality, and I think that's just a really cool part of the army.
Very cool part of the army. I love that, and I love I do two things actually with my army. One is that I read a lot of the lore, and so I build a lot of the characters into my army. And I've recently just been printing their QR codes that I've created off of their little, lexicon, Warhammer wiki, whatever thing, and I put it on the bottom of the base. So if somebody wants to know about it, they can lift the base up and scan it and get information about that. Yeah. And then the other thing that I do is that if I it's kind of fun, it's fluffy, right?
Well, I mean, we're all giant nerds, right? So that's
absolutely, yeah.
Like, and it's like hidden nerddom too, right? Like
it is
quiet nerd. So unless you ask, and then you're like, oh yeah, no, just flip him over. You can learn everything about him and everybody else all around him.
Right. Well, the other thing that I do too is that if I lose to another Space Marine player in a tournament, I will paint a model dedicated to them into my army. And so a lot of my models have, like an opponent's name from whatever particular tournament I was at. And then I'll take a picture and I'll send it to them. I'll PM them and send it to them. And so my army is kind of nostalgic that way too, because I can look at certain models and go, oh yeah, I was at the, SoCal Open for that one, or I was at the Bay Area Open for that one. I remember playing this player. And so it's there's an extra layer there as well. So it's kind of fun.
That's a neat idea. I really like that. It's like how folks will add laurels onto like helmets if they're like a sergeant does something really like holds their ground against impossible odds.
Right.
So, yeah, I really like that. That's neat.
Thank you.
Getting back to the list though, this Proteus kill team's a little different. It has like I said, it has the Infernus Heavy Bolter, but 2 Vanguard vets and 3 bikers instead of 1 Vanguard vet and 1 biker. And I assume that's because these guys get combat squatted and go off and do their own thing, or do these guys also stay as okay? And it's
combat squad them off.
So all the big guy or all the fast guys go off together.
Yeah, and I'll usually spend a CP, put them in Deep Strike Reserve so I can bring them in, usually turn 3 where I need them on the board. And the other thing that it does too is, every turn I'm just reminding my opponent, remember I've got that squad in Deep Strike Reserve. And I do that for 2 reasons. One, to let them know that they're there, but also in the back of their mind, it's like, oh, I have to be aware that I've still got one more unit coming in. It's a threat. And so if they're not covering the board somewhere, they're going to come in and they're going to do some damage. And so it's a powerful tool. It's a very powerful tool. And I think sometimes we downplay what that can do to an opponent, because if it pulls their mind off of what they're doing, even for just a second, and they fail to get on an objective or fail to get an HQ unit into place where the ore is going to have a benefit, then it's a victory for me. So.
Yeah, I mean, and it's so interesting to me hearing you say that you purposefully keep, 150 points, 180 points off of the board until turn 3, where I'm thinking, I need every single model shooting like every turn, right? I'm not like I always think like, I forgot to bring in that unit turn 2. Well, whoops, that's a big mistake. Now I have to make up for it. But you're like saying that no, you do that on purpose, and you pay a CP to do it, which is a
Yeah.
privilege.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, it really is. And I don't do it every single game.
Sure.
But depending on who I'm playing against, if I get the feeling that having that unit in Deep Strike Reserve is going to mess with them more than putting it on the board, then I'll absolutely spend the CP and do that. But they move fast enough too, and because they're OPSEC, they're still a mixed unit. That's why I've got those Vanguard vets in there. They can move through cover, and I can put them in buildings where they can't see them or can't get to them, and so they're so flexible, and because they're still a pretty innocuous point sink, 150 points, 150 plus, whatever it is.
Yeah.
That's nothing to spend to be able to run them around and like I say, create hate and discontent. So.
Yeah, and for those of listening who might not play Deathwatch, in a Proteus kill team, if you have a Vanguard vet, which is infantry, in a mixed unit with bikes, which are not infantry, the bikes gain the infantry keyword. So, like he just said, you can hide them in a building. Your bikes will get cover bonuses.
They
Which
will.
they'll
Yeah.
they get breachable. Your bikes can slam through ruins. It's pretty gnarly when your opponent doesn't know you can do that.
Well, it is, and I tried not to play Gotcha Hammer. I really
Sure.
hate doing that, but I'll walk through the list with my opponent. Do you know what bikes do in this unit? Do you know what Vanguard Vets unit do? Do you know what a Black Shield does in this unit? And I'll walk them through it, and I'll even print it on my list that I hand to them because I don't want them to get caught off guard. And almost every game I play, who's not familiar with Deathwatch, I still catch them on that stuff, and they're like, "Oh yeah, that's right, you told me."
Yeah.
And so it's not like they weren't forewarned, but it really does have some major play. Having bikes, being able to get around and move like infantry, and still keep the biker keyword because that's what they are, is and be OPSEC too. On top of that, it's huge in
And
this edition.
and I noticed that when these guys are running around, so another thing is in a mixed unit, your majority toughness is the toughness of the entire unit. So you
Yep,
have 3 bikers, which are toughness 5, and 2
that's right.
Vanguard vets, which are toughness 4. So the whole unit is toughness 5
T5. That's
until
right.
those bikers are dead. So, and then like you said earlier, bikers in there, 1 CP, fall back and charge. So if you really need to get them stuck in one more time and tar pit a unit, or get that extra attack from shock assault, or you got it, baby, right there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, they're a great unit, and like I said, for the points, they do so much work. They do so much work on the battlefield.
I do see that on this list, one of the Vanguard vets in this unit has a bolt pistol, not a chainsword. I assumed that was a mistake, but that's what was listed on Best Coast pairings. So
I play WYSIWYG most of the time, and that particular model actually has an Infernus pistol on there.
ah,
And rather than snap it off and put a chainsword on there, I was just like, oh, I'll just make it a bolt pistol, and I can just, I check with the TO, is it okay if I do this? And they're going to say yes. They always do. And then when I show up, it's like, there's just, just so you know, my army's WYSIWYG, except for this model right here. That's a bolt pistol, not an Infernus bolter. And then you hear a sigh of relief afterwards, so they feel good
yeah.
about it, So
But then you go ahead and bring a combi melta on the watch sergeant and a power fist on him as well. I assume that's to crack some of that T8 stuff running around.
yeah, you've got to be prepared to get into hand-to-hand combat. You've got to be able to deal with that. Meltas are the name of the game right now in the meta, but I think like anything, too much of something of a good thing can be too much of a good thing. And so I think people are trying to find that balance right now, and having that combi melta on there with those sergeants, usually by turn 2 or turn 3, they're in range with them anyways. And being able to pop that little bit extra damage on a vehicle or on one of those big units or a big character, even if they're in range, where nobody else is, in front of them, or, they're just out there, and it's just, they do great work. So I feel like it's worth the point sync.
So then you have your other characters, or you have an apothecary, chief apothecary, selfless healer, pretty standard. Again, this isn't the Primaris apothecary. This is your bog standard firstborn. And then an interesting choice I saw: company champion, 55 points. Is this for more character assassination goodness? Fight first in combat kind of thing, or?
I was, down on points. I think I had 60 points left when I was list building, and I was like, what can I do for 60 points? I was like, wait a minute, I can take a company champion. And I don't remember if I put the Dominus Aegis on him in this list or not.
You did.
But I'll typically do that with him so I can drop him behind those intercessors and give him a 5-up and vulnerable. But regardless, I thought, well, I've just got so much flexibility with this guy. He can go around and raise banners by himself. He's a threat to characters. If I put him in the drop pod with the Watchmaster, he's good there. If I leave him behind with the captain and they decide to come in and try and do stuff, he's going to be good there. And so he's for the points, I think he's just a really flexible character choice, and I think he's a good option.
Yeah, I was going to ask, actually, because a lot of the time, I mean, I've done this too. When I really want that Dominus Aegis in the army, this is the cheapest way to get it
absolutely.
into the army.
Yep.
So I have a couple lists with the company champion as well, but I've kind of backed off of him because I'm just running so many Proteus kill teams with so many storm shields, it doesn't matter. Like,
you don't need it, right?
Yeah, I mean, when you've got a 4-up, it's not like a 5-up's going to help you.
No.
But then, so kind of the meat and the potatoes, if you will. Well, I guess not the meat, but maybe the potatoes, or maybe the steamed vegetables are a couple of units of company veterans. Like you got one 3-man, and you got one 6-man. I didn't even know company veterans went to 6 men. If I'm honest,
did I put 6 in there? Or
there's 6 on this list. 1, 2, 3,
I might have
4, 5. Oh no, 5. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I just can't count. So
that's okay. No, I thought maybe that's
a game where you have to add and subtract one frequently. I just failed at doing that.
That's all right. No, it's all good. No, I think I was just excited about the option of being able to bring in a multi-melta, and so I wanted to do it. And the command squads really don't operate any differently than a vet squad, other than the fact that they're not OBSEC, but you can make them OBSEC. The 3-man unit actually was a modeling choice. It was the rule of cool, and so I wanted to build. I had acquired probably 6 or 7 of the old Assault on Blackreach captains from that 5th edition box set, and I wanted to put them to use somewhere. And I thought, oh my gosh, this would be a great opportunity to bring in some keepers, some watch keepers, modeled with these guys because they have the capes and everything. And I've got some really boss storm shields, Deathwatch storm shields.
Very cool.
And my Watchmaster's kit bashed out of an old 5th edition captain as well. And so there was a little congruency with the models. And so it was really just, here's a cheap option with some, potent, killy, bashy, smashy stuff, and they can still run around for fairly inexpensive points and, secure an objective or something like that. And again, they're a psychological threat. Like they look mean. And so, in fact, in that last game against that Dark Angel player, he was like, well, if I go over there, those squads are just going to wreck me. And they really aren't, because, the power axes only do 1 point of damage. The power sword only do 1 point of damage. But anyway, so the one was just a rule of cool thing. And it was a small point sink to do stuff, and so.
On this squad in particular, the 5-man, you have 2 combi meltas, and then, like you said, the multi-melta as well. So, there's some potent, like, AT there as well.
Yeah,
If anything got that close, anyway. But, like...
well, put them in a drop pod, baby, and drop them down, and then all of a sudden it's like, crap! I've got this multi-melta with 2 shots now at 24 inches, and it's going to hurt. It's going to sting. And so... in the back of your opponent's mind again, while all these other things are going on the board, if they've got a vehicle out there or a knight out there or, even a character that's out of position, it's like, dang it, man, I've got that freaking multi-melta over there that's going to wreck me if I get too close. And so it just, again, it's that, that psychological threat, and the damage output's pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, D6+2, good
Yeah.
shot. And
Yep.
that's coming from the combi meltas too. And you can choose not to shoot the bolter part and just shoot the melta.
Right.
And when you come out of a drop pod, you're within 9, and it's a 12-inch range on those multi-meltas, so you
Yeah.
get at least D6 damage, which can be
Well,
swingy as hell, but when you roll that a 6, it feels good.
it feels so good. Oh my gosh.
Like,
Yeah. Well, and honestly, in that last game against that Dark Angel player, the dice were hot. Every time I went to wound with the Vindicare, I was rolling a 6, so it was D6 damage instead of D3. Every time I went to wound with the Meltas from that squad, I was rolling 5s and 6s. I mean, they were just wrecking everything in their path. It was pretty awesome. So it felt good.
Then, not topping it off yet, but I guess topping it off for your infantry, you have 3 eliminators. Just a normal eliminator squad of 3, all with the bolt sniper rifle.
Yeah, so they're there to, do some damage to characters, and statistically, and it bear it out in the games, usually 2 of the 3 will hit and 1 of the 2 will wound. And so it's 2 points. And so your opponent's not too worried about that. But when they've got a 4 wound model, whether it's an apothecary or, another boss buff character of some kind, and all of a sudden half their wounds are gone, now that Vindicare looks really menacing.
Yeah.
And following up with a shot from him is pretty amazing. So I was averaging about a character a turn in my matches. And so I've built other lists now. In fact, I've got another list that I really, really like, where you're bringing in the Phobos captain as a sniper with his bolt carbine, the Eliminator squad with the Spectrus kill team, and you put comms relay in there, and now they're hitting on, you can even be hitting on 2s, re-rolling 1s, and then the Vindicare, and that combination with those 3 units is really, really potent.
I've been messing around with some Phobos lists. Mainly, it started as like a joke. It was fun, but I realized like incursors are good.
They are very good.
Incursors are good. You
lose
1 AP from the gun, but like you're ignoring cover.
Right.
I mean, that's better than an AP, really, or it's
Well,
equivalent to an AP, really.
It is, but
most of the time.
But the other thing too that people, I think, sometimes don't think about is you're preventing your opponent from coming in within 12 inches. And in a game where board placement and positioning is probably the most important thing, that's a huge ability. And like I said earlier,
infiltrators.
Yeah.
Incursors.
Incursors, right? Yeah. So the infiltrators, but no, the incursors are, and the ability to drop mines that do mortal wounds too. It's like, do I really want to go towards that objective? I've only got 1 wound left on my character here, and but it's yeah. I mean, and it's fluffy too, right? It's fluffy for the watch.
Yeah, I was actually gonna ask you about some of the things that I didn't see in this list, and one of those things was infiltrators, just because, like you said, the 12-inch bubble of no deep strike, and then you can string out a 5-man unit. You can string them out 9 inches if you really want to get cheeky, and now you have a bubble, 12 inches wide, and what's that? Like, you can screen out at least 2/3 of your deployment zone on the small edge with 5 dudes. So if you bring 2 of those squads, you good luck dropping in my backfield, guys.
Not going to happen.
Yeah. So
and
I was actually curious to see if you'd heard or done any research about bringing a Spectrus kill team, five infiltrators, and then 4 eliminators, or 6 infiltrators and 4 eliminators, and you combat squad them so that the infiltrator has the comms relay, but you just kind of talked about that. So with the Phobos captain re-rolling all those wounds and 1s, that's
it's pretty powerful. And I ran that practice list in our gaming sessions this last week, and I drew one of our teammates who runs Necrons, and it was really, really powerful. I ran Lord of Deceit on him as one of his warlord traits, and so I was able to redeploy my units. And so I put the eliminators in a position where he thought they were going to be, so he specifically put his characters on the other side of the board, and then I redeployed, and then I brought my Vindicare in with that unit, and they just sat there and picked his characters off, and it just destroyed him. I felt bad for him.
I'd always ask which one has the Resorb, and then just be like,
Yeah,
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 that Resorb.
yeah. It was fun. So yeah, good stuff.
Cool.
I really like that option. I don't like the lack of hand-to-hand combat ability the captain had, but in the games that I practiced him with, it was never an issue. Nobody ever got close enough for it to be a problem, and so it worked out fine.
And you got those company veterans too with the bodyguard rule,
Right.
which is probably
Yep.
the most single broken rule in the entire game at the moment. Like, I think it's really funny, the idea of like, you could have your bodyguards hiding behind a wall while you stand out in the middle of a field, and everybody can shoot you. Could usually, but you have the bodyguard rule, so you can't get shot. I think that
it's like neener.
Yeah.
Right. And so
ridiculous.
I think they'll probably FAQ that at some point in time and adjust it so it's a little more realistic. But yeah, you're absolutely right. It's kind of dumb right now, but it is a rule, and I'll make sure my opponent knows about it so he doesn't get any gotcha hammer playing. But that's exactly what I did. Is my command squad was on the second floor of a building and behind cover where they couldn't see him, and my captain was sitting on top of the building sniping guys, but they couldn't target him. So
oh man, that's hilarious. I mean,
that
was so frustrating.
Yeah, it was aggravating. Yeah.
Like, so you've invested a lot of points into killing enemy characters, which is great. I mean, they are force multipliers. That's what they're there for, right? Yeah. So when you're taking those guys out, like, suddenly their units are much less, if you kill a character and their army goes down by 15% efficiency, like, that's enormous. So what do you do if you run into lists that have bodyguards? Like, I saw there's a one list that a friend of mine was gonna run as I forget which Terminator type the Death Guard have, but they naturally have bodyguard, and then also their Terminators are just so tough now, with the -1 damage and stuff. So how would you deal with a list like that? Would you just kill the units you can kill, like kill the characters that aren't protected first? Like, how would you deal with people that aren't giving you those easy to kill characters?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question, because one of the things that I built into the list was specifically, what do you do with that? And that Necrons player that I played against, this buddy of mine, had some bodyguard out there. And so, I specifically shot, the Cryptex. And so, I shot him with my Eliminators and my Heavy Intercessors on one unit. And then on the other one, I shot the Cryptex with one of the other units. Anyways, it was kind of funny because he had one bodyguard left on the one guy, and I shot him with the Vindicare, and then did a double kill CP drop, and then shot his Warlord and killed him too. It was pretty awesome. So
that's rad.
So it does pivot off of that, but you've got to be thinking about that. Hey, I've got to make sure that I get rid of the bodyguard first, and then I can drop that character. So as long as you're thinking about it, it didn't seem to be too big of a deal.
Very cool. All right, so your transports, you got the drop pod. Who usually goes in the drop pods? Sounds like the company vets, the big unit of them, and then one of your two HQs, either the Watchmaster or the Captain?
Yeah, it just depends on what I'm seeing on the board and where I think they need to be. But yeah, either one of those two, and sometimes I'll even put the Apothecary in there if I feel like I really need to have some more resilience on that side of the board, rather than where my main gun line is going to be. But yeah, typically one of those two. And then whoever doesn't go in the drop pod, the Rhino is really just in the backfield to, keep a unit safe if my opponent goes first, because I'm null deploying and some of my guys are in Deep Strike Reserve where you can't even shoot at them. And so it's just protection for them, really.
Yeah, an extra ablative 10 wounds. Yeah, that makes sense. And I mean, Rhinos aren't that expensive, so.
No. And again, flexibility, right? So if I want to get a unit up the board, I can. If I want to use the Rhino to, drop that unit out and then charge an enemy unit or a character with the Rhino, they're probably not going to shoot it in Overwatch, and then I can get my hand-to-hand combat unit in there. So, if you know how to use that Rhino, it can be a very effective tool for you on the board. It gives you a lot of different options.
So I want to talk to you about my favorite Deathwatch flyer, our only real flyer, the Corvus Blackstar. That model is
Yeah,
incredible.
it
Love
is.
it. I've used it a couple times in some games, and it always seems to be lackluster. So what am I missing? How would you use it? You said you could actually get guys out turn one,
Yeah.
and I'm curious how you. Is that a stratagem I missed, or
No, I used to run the Corvus all the time in 8th edition. And it was kind of funny because the conversation in the Deathwatch forums was like, man, the Corvus Black Star sucks and da 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 da. But one of my key units was that hand-to-hand combat squad, and I would drop it down to 8 models with a biker, a Vanguard vet, a Terminator. And you've got to build it differently now in ninth edition. It won't work the same. But I get that biker out within 3 inches, and he's 4 inches up the board. Now I'm 7 inches down the board, and I would just start bringing the models out, and you could get a turn one charge. I think I went back and looked at all the matches. I think I had out of 71 turn one charges over the course of numerous RTTs, GTs, and so forth before COVID. I failed a turn one charge one time with that unit. And it's just ridiculous. It's not as good now in ninth because now you have to be wholly within 3 inches when you deploy. Okay. But you can still get a lot of range out of that unit. And again, if you're thinking about what you're doing, you can turn them into White Scars, Brotherhood of Veterans, and you can you move, advance, and charge still with them. And it's just a powerful unit to get into hand-to-hand combat in turn one if you feel like you need to do that. And there were a couple of tournament games where my opponent was running a Knights list, and they've got their Warlord Knight right on the line, and I'm like, are you sure you want him right there? And he's like, yep. And I said, he's 24 inches away from where I'm at with my Corvus and this unit inside. Yep. And then turn one, bam, they hop out, wreck him, pile and consolidate into another night. And he's like, all of a sudden, like, what just happened? And and so now with the ability to cloak that Black Star on turn one, where for a fact that it's not going to be shot at, it just takes that concern off. And so I think it offers a lot of flexibility, and I think it still has a lot of play in 9th edition. I'm not running one currently, which kind of breaks my heart because I did a lot of custom paint job on them, and I love the model. I think it's one of the best box models in the game.
Yeah,
but
it's an amazing model.
Absolutely it is. So I love it. I'm just not running one right now, but there's options out there for sure.
So you're saying that you used to be able to keep it right on the line of your deployment zone, and then turn one, you would just get your dudes out right away, and you'd be able to kind of slingshot them up the board based on the way that the rules were written at the time.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. I thought you knew some kind of way to like get it to fly over there and then still drop guys on turn one, like an assault transport. And I was like, I don't remember seeing that, because that would be amazing. I'd have 2 of them if I could.
Yeah. There were times I had a list that I was running that I actually played against Stephen Box prior to the SoCal Open. Stephen Box runs Vanguard Tactics. He's a friend of mine over in England. Great guy. And we were just practicing a few different things. And I had two Corvuses and 3 Deimos Pattern Vindicator Laser Destroyer tanks, and then a couple of squads. And it was a very powerful list, even in that last edition. But
so cool. Like, you don't see vehicles anymore. That's like a cool list.
It was a very cool list, and I knew that going into the SoCal, there was going to be, Nick Donavati was going to be there, TJ Lanigan was going to be there, Don Huson was going to be there, a lot of the big name players, and I knew that I had a good list to compete against them. In fact, going into turn 3, I ended up playing against the Coopster down there from Rage Quit Table Flip team. Great guy, Gene Steeler player. And man, I did everything I could to screen out my tanks in the back, and he still got those pesky Gene Steelers in on him, and that was the game after that. But 2 units jumping out of the Corvus, with a lot of shooting and shields and, you know, a Terminator in there and a bike and everything. They just did so much work, and it was fluffy and I just love the model. And one thing that I don't know if players have thought about this, but you could put that hand-to-hand combat unit in the Corvus still, get them out, charge up the board, get another unit in the Corvus, and then take off with them, right?
Yeah.
And so there's options there that I still think that people are missing out on. So I love it. Great model.
Very cool. All right. So, how you've talked about it a little bit. How are you gonna change up this list in the future, or is this the one?
No, no. One of the things that I pride myself in doing is trying to play a really fluffy list and still be competitive. And so sometimes that forces choices out of my list. You know, rather than running the intercessor, 5 outrider, triple 3 squads. You know,
You mean like Manny?
yeah, like Manny, and you know that's fine. You know, that's great. But I think there's more depth to the Deathwatch, and I like to play that angle. And so one of the lists that I'm toying with right now is actually bringing an Inquisitor in as well, and paying the 2 CP for the Vindicare to come in with you know, the requisition strat, so that I can have the Inquisitor in there, because being able to farm CP off of your opponent's stratagem as well with esoteric lore, and you know, having the fluff of having an Inquisitor there on top of that, I think is pretty cool. It just sucks so much CP out of the game before you start.
Yeah. It's like you're trying to make up for the CP that you
Yeah,
spent to get in there.
that you spent. Yeah.
So you can still only get 1 CP back per battle round from all of these ways to get back CP, right? You can't triple dip.
You can't triple dip unless it's a stratagem, and there's some question as to whether or not some of these traits, warlord traits, flirt with that line or not. I tend to defer to the side of justice rather than mercy, and so I'd say probably not. But to ensure with all the different options that I have that I'm absolutely like 99% guaranteed I'm getting a CP back every turn is pretty strong.
Yeah, it's really good knowing that you're gonna have. So you're gonna start with what, 6 CP from this list, if I remember right.
This list that I'm running right now is 6 CP. The one that I've been running the last week starts with 8.
Yeah, 6.
If I do the Inquisitor, it's going to be 3 to start out with, and that kind of scares me, because the Deathwatch just is CP hungry to make it function well.
Yeah.
And I already know going into turn 1 that I'm going to be spending probably 3 or 4 CP with some of the stuff that I'm doing, and so I've got to make sure that I've got it there. And so that concerns me. I don't like to play lists or models or units or anything where there's a complete, you know, unknown. I mean, you can't do that completely in the game anyways, but you can manage your dice, you can manage your rolls. And so I want to try and do that as much as I can.
Very cool. So let's talk about secondaries. With this list, I don't see While We Stand We Fight in here.
Nope.
But you're definitely taking Engage.
Yes.
You mentioned banners earlier, so I'm assuming Engage and banners, and then you have one that you tailor to your opponent, probably. So, like, if they have 7 characters, you're probably taking Assassinate, or...
What I'm actually doing is I'm taking Engage and Assassinate and probably banners, but the one that's up for grabs is the banner one.
Oh, okay.
Because
you have so many anti-character units,
yeah,
that makes sense. I don't know why I didn't think about that. That makes a lot of sense.
Well, and the other thing too, though, Rick, is that you know, when you pick that, your opponent knows ahead of time he's coming after my characters,
Right.
and so it adds that additional layer of concern on top of the Vindicare. Like, I really have to be careful about where I put my characters, and I promise you, if you make one mistake, I'm going to capitalize on that, and you're going to lose one. And so I haven't had a game yet in practice play or in tournament play over the last, you know, probably 6 weeks where I haven't almost maxed out my Assassinate secondary. I can guarantee just about every game I'm getting at least 6 points for sure, usually 9, and I'm comfortable with that. So.
That's really good. That's really fun. Like and like I said, right? I mean, the way assassinate usually goes is those points start stacking up turn 3, turn 4, turn 5.
Yep. Yep.
But when you're popping 3 on turn 1 and then for 4 more turns, and that's assuming you go like second, right? You
Yeah.
pop his character turn 1 on your turn.
Yep. Yep.
That means for the next 4 turns he doesn't have that character.
That's right.
Which, depending on which one you shot, so like his apothecary, if he's got a Deathwing Terminator squad and he's counting on that apothecary to be always bringing someone back, if you pop him turn 1, like, he is suddenly a lot less efficient than he wanted to be.
Absolutely. Well, and again, there's always, and I can't stress this enough, especially with newer players. There are money units that create a psychological advantage when you play your opponent. I really like to be pleasant and upbeat, and I like to smile and laugh and have a good time. But I'm going to bring my A game, and I'm not going to apologize for it. I'm not going to, pick on you or anything like that. But I'm gonna make you earn that victory. And so having that threat out there, and absolutely, usually the apothecary is the first one to go, and then usually the second one is their major.
Yeah.
Their major force multiplier, usually a captain of some kind. And that Dark Angel player that I had that chaplain that's a beat stick that hits on strength 10 or 12 or whatever it is.
The interrogator chaplain.
The interrogator chaplain, yeah.
Terror and stuff with like 10 attacks. And
yeah.
He's better
and
than
so
Ragnar or whatever.
Oh yeah, he's ridiculous. And so he was proudly marching him up the board with his Deathwing Terminator squad. And then all of a sudden those eliminators hit him, and he's like, I took a couple of wounds, and then I hit him with that Vindicare with no invulnerable save and rolled a 6 on the wounds. And it's like, it's D6 damage. And then all of a sudden he just froze, and he was like, you could see the look like, uh-oh. And then I rolled a 6. I rolled a 6.
Yeah. So he would have been dead anyway, even if that's the first time you shot him.
And so he was just like, crap. And you could just see that, he had so much confidence sunk into that one guy, especially for the litanies that he was going to be pulling out on that, Deathwing Terminator squad. And then he was gone, and it psychologically crushed him. That was the point in that game where I knew I won.
On turn 1?
That was turn 2, actually, when I took him out. Yeah.
That's amazing. I never thought of it that way, but I actually have a box of eliminators, sealed even, that I bought off some guy.
Bust them out.
I bought them off some guy off eBay for like nothing, and they've just been sitting there because I'm like, well, I'll probably put the las fusiles on them, get some AT. But now I'm like, nope, it's gonna be bolt rifles.
Yeah, for sure.
They don't look like they're easy to magnetize, and that's something I've been doing religiously with my Deathwatch armies, magnetizing everything because of how many options we have. But
I love you, man. I can't do it.
Really? I didn't want to buy another 100 boxes of vets. I didn't need 400 van vets sitting on my bookshelves.
I've got probably 30, give or take. I'm just looking around at the models I've got. Got a couple in boxes still, I haven't busted out, but I'll typically commit to something that I know works well and just kind of stick with it during the season with those particular units, whether it's Storm Bolters and Storm Shields or the Deathwatch Bolter and Chainsword. I typically just kind of stick with it and run with it.
Very cool. So I want to talk to you now about matchups. So I want to break them down into 3 categories. I want to break them down into ones so this is assuming equal player skill, right? So maybe your friends that what are the matchups you hate or least enjoy playing against, and why? What are the ones you most enjoy playing against, and why? And then I wanted to do one where it's like, what is just always fun? Like, what do you always have fun playing against?
I think it really comes down, at least for me, probably more of the player than it does the army itself. But I always love it. I guess let me back up here. So the first one you want me to address is
of questions.
Yeah, that's okay. So that's fine. So The one that I probably least like playing against with this particular army is, large AP, large damage output armies. And so when I play against knights or vehicle lists, I have to be really, really careful about model placement, because we're an army of paragons, right? I mean, we have better, less expensive options than we did in 8th edition, but it's still an expensive army, and you don't have a lot of models to just lose. And so in some ways it forces me to play a little bit better, because I got to play a little more cagey when I come up against lists like that, and they scare me. Talking about that Admech list, those Castellans just freaking, or not the Castellans, but you know what I'm talking about.
The Castellans with the like 36 shots with 2 of them.
Yeah,
Right. And
just
then
ridiculous.
Mars, they're like, if they hit on 6s, they explode, and then they also do mortal wounds, and then they do
Yep.
they do mortal wounds back to you if you shoot them.
I hate that list,
robots
and
are insane, man.
that's what he was running too. In fact, in a previous game that I played against, was actually another tournament, my Vindicare died as a result of that. I
The
was
bouncing
like,
mortal wound.
yeah. I was like, what just happened?
That's
Because he had
good.
got his flyer back there, and he was exposed, and he got him down to 1 wound. And I'm like, oh, he's fine. I shot the flyer off, but then anyways, it was dumb. But so the large damage output, large AP armies really are a challenge.
Sisters.
I don't worry about sisters as much for that, because they're not really running a lot of multi-miltas right now. The real strong meta for sisters are the Repentia with their chain swords. My buddy Jordan, that's on our team, won Best in Faction last year, and I think even without, if it would have been a season without COVID, I'm pretty sure he still would have done it. He just had the right juice and the right combo of list builds and stuff like that. And I think with the storm shields, we've got better durability than I think people probably realize.
I was playing against Custo as a friend on Saturday, and he charged I had 5 vets just sitting on a back objective, and he charged them, and he was talking about how he's just gonna mincemeat these guys, and 2 of them lived. 2 of them lived because storm shields, man. Like, he's standing there like, what? I'm like, I still hold it. They're obsec. Like, get out of here.
That's right.
Like, I'm gonna score this one more turn. I'm gonna lose him the next turn, but that's fine. Like, I'm gonna score this one more turn. Yeah.
Well, here's the thing. Here's the thing to think about with storm shields, and I don't know if people have really done the math, but when you have a full Proteus kill team with a Terminator, a Bayek, a Vanguard vet in there, and a bunch of storm shields, by the time you math out the saves on wounds that they provide, it's like having a knight on the table. And people don't think about that. They think, well, this unit's only got 15 wounds or 16 wounds. Well, that's true. But by the time you math out how many saves you're going to make and how much durability they have, it's literally like having a knight out there. And I share that
cover too.
Oh yeah, it's ridiculous. So and so, don't underestimate even just a 5-man vet squad, right, with storm shields, because they're gonna hold up, and it's a money unit, and it's really cool. So those are the lists that I really don't like playing against. The lists I do like playing against.
So
go ahead.
Other than Admech, and they're just massive amounts of 1 damage shots that even if you do save half, you're gonna take half. So you were mentioning the high damage like vehicle list. So like guard or what?
Guard.
What other armies?
Yeah, guard can be a real challenge for you if you don't really deploy well and manage your movement through terrain. If you try and get out there, Tau's another one too. If you get out there and just trying to run up the board with your unit, you're going to lose. You've got to protect those units and be thinking about how you're going to use them. That ability to pound them to dust with the guard is just sick. And we've got a great guard player in our community, and I love playing against him. And he's nerdy. He dresses up. He's got that handlebar mustache, and he talks kind of like an English chap. But he plays guard really, really well. And every time I play John,
He's
I
trying to
get
be
nervous.
Montgomery.
I don't know that he's trying to do it, but he realizes that he kind of can look, like an
Sure.
old
Yeah.
Civil War general or something like that. And so he plays to it, and he's got the outfit. It's fun. I really like him. He's a great guy.
That's awesome.
But every time he gets those tanks out, man, I'm sweating. So it's tough. And I played Brian Pullen a few years ago at the OVO before Brian made it big, a year ago. And I had a scout that withstood almost the entire volley of fire from his entire army being in cover with his cloak. It was awesome. You got a purity seal out of that one. So, but those armies are the ones that really scare me.
Yeah. All right.
The ones that.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go right ahead.
I was gonna ask. So what do you like playing against? Like where I guess like isn't the term. It's when you walk up to a table and you know that your next opponent is X faction. Do you have a pretty good feeling that you're going to do well? What are those factions?
Those factions are typically Xenos factions. So, just knowing that you've got stratagems that allow you to deal with them better than most players do.
Yeah.
I kind of crave that because it's good. It's so good. And it's won me tournaments before.
Yeah.
Or matches in tournaments, I should say.
I believe it.
But
It's 1 CP. It's
yeah,
strong.
and taking off those marker lights from Tau and some of those things. I really just anytime I get to play against the Xenos, it's not just a fluffy match and it adds to the narrative of the game, but I know I've got tools to deal with them, and so I'm pretty confident that things will work out well, with the exception of my buddy Rich, who is the war boss of all war bosses. He is just so tough to play against, and so but I still love playing against him because it's it's orcs, it's fluffy, and so I really like those games a lot.
That's very cool. Orcs be crumpin', man.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, and then so what? I mean, I guess the second question kind of ties into the third. But what do you like?
Sure.
Just always have a good time playing against, even if you know you might lose. Like, what's an army? I mean, I know you said that the player obviously makes it as well, but
yeah,
what's an army where you're like, all right, I know this is going to be fun regardless of who. Well, I hope that's the whole hobby, obviously, that you're having
we want
fun
that
whether you win or lose. But like, what factions you always know you're gonna have a good game, have a fun game against?
I always know I'm gonna have a fun game against orcs because it's just so fluffy, and I know that I've got to be on point with my game because they've got just a massive amount of numbers, and so I really like those. Tyrannids are another one, and part of that goes back to my old friend Tony. Shout out to Tony out there. He used to play in his backyard hammer with his Tyrannids list in second edition and going into third. But again, I feel like I've got the right kind of tools to deal with them, and so I know going into the game that it's going to be a good game, win, lose, or draw against those types of armies, and so I always look forward to them, and they're fun. And more than anything, in the end, this is a game, and we want people to, go to tournaments and go to the local, friendly place where they're playing and just have a good time and de-stress from life and have some good work-life balance. Don't come to these games and these tournaments, being that one guy, because especially now in the current meta that we're in, you're going to find yourself not playing very many games and not being invited to tournaments or being asked not to come to tournaments because of that. And so,
yeah, that's really refreshing to hear that they're taking care of, that the community is taking care of itself, because, nothing is more demoralizing than like crushing a new player and then being a jerk, right? Like,
yeah.
I've been very fortunate. The people I've worked with and played with will, they'll even explain what they're doing, why they're doing it.
Right.
Like, as they're like, I'm going to go over here with these guys. I'm trying to grab this and I want to kill these guys because I know you can do this thing. And that is very helpful to me as a new player because, like I was telling you in our chat before this talk, I got some weak game, and a lot of it is in like my deployment. I don't know what to stick in a teleportarium. I know I'm supposed to hide stuff. Like I get that, hide it all. But like otherwise, I'm really, that's a weak part of my game. And you even mentioned,
Sure.
you played against one person where you're like, well, I won already, and I just know that on deployment. Like, and that's
Yeah, part of that comes with experience, and you kind of figure that out, and you learn your play style too. There was a period where I was being too aggressive, and I didn't think that was possible in the game, but you can be. And just this last week, in fact, in our practice rounds with our team, one of our other teammates did the same thing. He was running a Blood Angels list, and he's like, "Nope, I lost." In fact, he was playing Rich, and he's like, "I lost to you because I came in too hot." And you can do that, and so you've got to find that balance, and you can't substitute repetitions and just playing to figure that out about yourself and how you're going to play and get that in. But you know um, we want the community in large to be good, and because I've got two teenage boys now, I want them to have good experiences as well. And so it's important to me to make sure that I have my game and my opponent have a game where they walk away going, man, I lost that game, but man, it was sure fun. And
yeah.
I really enjoyed playing. And for me, that's more important. In fact, this last year at the OVO, the last game against a guy showed up, and you could tell he just didn't want to be there. And I'm like, are you okay? And he's like, man, I just, I don't know. I'm thinking about just, bailing on this game. I'm like, oh, no, let's roll some dice. And I'm like, what's going on? And he's like, well, this is my first tournament ever. And I'm like, you came to the LVO? That's your first tournament ever? Really?
That's the
And
way
he's
I would
like,
roll too, man. Like go big or go home, right?
yeah. And so he's like, well, my brother bought the tickets. He thought it'd be fun to come together. I'm just having a miserable time, and I'm sick. And I said, look,
Oh,
looking at your
confident.
army, if you can withstand the first three turns, because my army hits like an anvil on the first two turns, but if you can withstand those first three turns, by turn 5 with a couple of good moves, like you might squeak out a win. He's like, really? And I'm like, yeah, let's roll dice. And so we ended up going, and sure enough, by turn 5, he rolled ahead and beat me by 2 points. And his whole attitude changed. He was like, oh my gosh, that was amazing. That was so epic. And he was just all excited, and it's like, how did you know? And I was like, well, you play as long as I have, you kind of figure some things out, and you can kind of math it out. And anyways, but having him walk away from that game, just having had a good experience, was worth more to me than if I would have won the whole thing and walked away with that, $5,000 check or whatever it was, because here was a guy now who had a good experience and will likely probably keep playing because of that.
Absolutely.
As opposed to, never going to play Warhammer again. This game sucks. And then we just lost another player. And
You
so
salvaged it, man.
Yeah, I hate to see that. And so
that's super awesome. That's one of the reasons I started this channel, is I wanted to, I wanted to learn the game, and then one of the best ways to learn is to teach. So this is my virtual teaching environment. It's kind of turned into like an in-person teaching environment too, because I play with 3 very brand new players, newer than I am, and then three pretty experienced players as well. So there's a nice spread of skill there.
Sure.
We all just love rolling dice and drinking some beer.
Well, kudos to you for doing this, Rick. I think it's great that you're taking a more proactive role in not only just your own personal journey and learning how to play the game, but providing a venue and opportunity for other people to learn as well. And I think that's courageous, because people in general, and men specifically, we don't like to fail at anything, and we don't like to air our dirty laundry out there in front of people. And being open to and exposing yourself with your vulnerabilities and kind of taking people along with you as you're learning how to play this game, I think is awesome. So I think that's great. I appreciate you doing that.
Yeah. Thank you for those very, very, very kind words. I mean, my tagline is, let's make some mistakes together. So, because that's the way I learn. Like,
sure,
pain is a powerful motivator, and that can be emotional or physical. So
absolutely. Well, and the good thing about that is by deciding ahead of time that you're just going to take some bumps and bruises, you're going to accelerate your learning curve. My son just started wrestling this last year, and I said, you're going to spend a lot of time staring at the ceiling, and you just need to prepare yourself for that. But if you're willing to weather that storm, you're going to get good, and I can help you get good. I've, did well in wrestling in high school years and years and years ago, and so it's fun to see him work through those challenges now. And one thing I love about him is he's willing, like you, to just jump in with both feet and just say, hey, I'm going to get beat up a little bit, but you know what? I'm going to come out of it on the other side a better person and a better player. So that's awesome.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's cool. That's cool that your son's staying motivated too. I've done like martial arts and stuff for in those first few years are just you're hunched over and bruised more often than not.
Yeah.
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 So I feel you. All right, Lou. Actually, hold on. I do have one last question.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I didn't take notes because I'm doing things off the cuff because why not? But I did want to
Sure.
ask you. So one of the other flexible things about Deathwatch that I love is we get to pick what doctrine we're in.
Yep.
So you don't have to have like if an opponent looks at your list and says, "Oh, he's got a lot of heavy weapons. I'll just hide turn 1, stay out of Devastator." You can just be like, "No, I'm gonna be in assault, burn that turn 1." And
Yep.
then on turn 2, you can give him the old wombo combo. Is that how you usually do it? Or, I mean, obviously every match is totally different, but what's your generally preferred, like, if you had a perfect game, what's your order of,
Perfect game, if I could map it out and make it happen every time, would be turn 1 Devastator Doctrine, turn 2 Assault, turn 3 Tactical, turn 4 Assault, and then turn 5 Tactical.
Really?
Yeah, because of the way my army plays, I know where my units are going to be and what they're going to be doing each turn, and what the damage output is going to be each turn based on the secondaries that I'm picking and where I want my army to be. And one thing you'll find as you talk to players that have been doing this for a long time, whether it's the Nanavadis or the TJ Lanigans or Reese or anybody else, Brandon Grant, they typically know what their army is going to do, and they really don't change their battle plan a whole lot during the course of the game. They might tweak it a little bit here and there based on what their opponent's bringing or the list that they're bringing, or maybe even the temperament of their players. They're gauging that when they first get to the table. But you should know pretty much how you're going to roll out. Now, sometimes things change and you have to adjust a little bit. But if I were going to play a perfect game with the list I'm running right now, that's probably what I would do.
So you'd wallop them with heavy weapons turn 1, you'd shoot them with all the other stuff turn 2, and then by turn 3 almost everybody's going to be in combat.
And that's turn 2 actually I do the Assault Doctrine, because that hand-to-hand combat unit I pull off the board in turn 1, knowing they're coming in on turn 2 and knowing that the midfield is still open enough that I can get them in there. If I wait till turn 3, it's going to be tough a lot of times to get them in, especially if you're playing a horde army. And so
they're already all over the board by then.
Yep. Yep. And so the way this army plays right now is that second turn is, I'm going to beat you down hard and make you think about why you're challenging me mid-board. And most of the time, low experienced players to mid experienced players will most often pull back, and then I'm going to shoot you turn 3 and then charge again in on turn 4. High level players often don't get affected by those kind of shenanigans, and so because I already know what my army is going to be doing, I'm not going to be playing to their temperament during the game anyways. I'm going to be playing how I've designed my army to play, and so I'm not going to change it up anyways for them. So that's kind of the thinking behind it.
Very, very cool. Yeah, I that's one of the things I gotta work on too. I'm usually like, I've got an idea of what I want to do based on my secondaries, and I'm looking at the board. Especially in a small, with our current situation, our stay at home orders, I'm not playing with a whole lot of people, so I know what their play styles are and what lists they're normally bringing and things. So I've got a pretty good idea what they're gonna do. So, but I'm only really thinking like a turn or 2 ahead. I've got a general outline, but I don't really, I was listening to a podcast and somebody was saying put your army out on an empty board with no opponent. So like, there's terrain but no opponent, and play a couple 5 rounds. Where are you? How far can you move? What really slows you down? What stops you? How can you get on those objectives? And by even just doing that, by playing by yourself, you can really learn something about your army and how fast it is and all that. So
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's great counsel. And I live in a little 2-horse town where the cattle, the chicken, and the sheep outnumber the people, and so I do a lot of self play where I get armies out on my board. I'm practicing movement. I'm practicing placement. I'm looking at damage output and statistics and ratios of kills and stuff like that. And so I'm managing all of that stuff. And that's healthy too, not just for yourself, but also to help build your own play confidence. So when you do go to a game, you can glance around at the table and you kind of already know where you need to be and what you need to do and how many models are going to drop on your opponent's team. And you can do that with confidence because you put in the time and the practice.
yeah, it's all about that training.
Yep.
All right, Lou. Thank you so much for taking
Thank
the
you.
time. This has been almost 2 hours. We've been
Wow, really? Holy
yeah,
smokes.
hour and 50 minutes is the recording right now. So including the technical difficulties I was having at the beginning, we're right around 2 hours. So thank you very much. This has been an incredible conversation. It's awesome walking through your list and getting into your mind a bit. You definitely are making me think about changing my list up a little bit. So looking forward to spending more time staring at Battlescribe.
That's awesome. Well, Rick, thank you so much for having me. It's been a sincere pleasure and been great getting to know you, connect with you here recently, and look forward to, trying to be a force of good and influence and helping our other fellow Deathwatch players and new players as well,
Yeah,
enjoy the
absolutely.
game that I've come to love. So thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Lou. I'll get this up soon. Nothing else to say, man. It's been an absolute pleasure.
All right. Thanks, Rick. You have a good night. We'll talk to you soon.